I'm Redmond Bacon, and this is Descent into the Berlinale. Today we'll be looking at Passages by Ira Sachs, which recently played in the Sundance Film Festival in the premieres section. It was absolutely adored by the critical community, but now as it travels to Europe, the question is, does Passages actually feel European, or is it merely dressing up in European clothes? And joining me here today is Jared Abbott, who is a film journalist also based in Berlin, and he has also seen Passages and can't wait to talk about it. So welcome to the show, Jared.
Thank you, Redmond. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell me how you first came across Passages, and just give me your general thoughts towards this film so far.
It was, one of the most buzzed about queer films at Sundance, so I obviously wanted to see it. I liked a few of Ira Sachs' earlier films. I really liked The Delta, and I just saw Love is Strange with Alfred Molina. So I was really curious to see this, and then it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know why. I think it sort of enters the story in the wrong place, and I don't think we really get a sense of the long-term relationship. I'm sort of crumbling at the beginning, and I had all these questions like, have they always been monogamous? This seems odd for modern big city queers in an art scene. I don't know. It was just like one's a film director, maybe kind of an asshole. He lives with his boyfriend. He sleeps with a woman. This relationship's on the outs, and I didn't really feel like the weight of the breakup that sort of puts the rest of the film into motion. So that was kind of like my first take on it. I've seen it 3 times since then. I'm trying to find things to enjoy, but I think it's growing on me a little bit.
So for someone who says they don't like it, has seen it 3 times, so maybe it's a sort of love-hate relationship, actually.
No, I mean, I think it's that feeling of that you don't want to get something wrong, and like you read, just across the board 4-star reviews for something that you just felt very meh about, and so it's just I've been wanting to see if I got it wrong, and keep looking for other things in it, or to see what other people are finding so great about it.
So to give some context to our listeners who may be based in other countries, the Berlinale is every February, and it has a massive selection of films. One of the biggest selections is the Panorama section, which borrows quite a few films from Sundance. So you have Heroica, which is there. I think Mutt, that's actually in Generation, but that also came from Sundance. And the big buzzy title from Sundance this year is Passages, which, judging from the initial reviews, you'd think would be probably the biggest hit so far of Ira Sachs' career. He's been an independent filmmaker for almost 30 years, and he's made about 9 films. But this is the first time an Ira Sachs movie has turned everyone into maybe a frenzy about what could be done making a European film as an American filmmaker, which is what I find really fascinating, because to me it is almost the perfect parody of a French film. It is like he's studied all the masters, Pillet, Romer, Philip Garel, and he's mashed them together into this absolutely bizarre attempt at Frenchness, which to me really absolutely doesn't work whatsoever. Although there are individually quite strong moments throughout the film. Do you think that maybe something is wrong with people out of Sundance, why they're so excited about films that feel European?
I think American audiences are starved for good-looking movies right now, because everything there's so many things that they're getting very used to this Netflix sort of everything looking kind of shitty and TV movie-ish. So I think when people see something like Passages, which is, I have to agree, it's just a very handsome looking movie, there's lots of just really lovely colors and textures and really great shots. So I think that there's just this immediate response of watching something that looks good, and someone thought about the shots a little bit before.
I think the blocking in the film is actually really good. There's one scene with the jealous boyfriend who is lying on the bed, and Franz Rogalski's character sort of covers him completely. And
this happens twice in the film. There's 2 times when the male lovers are having intimate discussions, and Franz's back is to directly to the camera. And like, I come from the teachings that you don't do that. I remember it was like controversial to introduce Whitney Houston in The Bodyguard with her back to the camera. That's not how you shoot people. I don't know. I just found it a little, what's the word? Just a little labored, just trying too hard.
So let's circle back to the beginning of the film. It starts with Franz Rogalski on set, and what kind of film is he directing to begin with? It's some
I don't know
kind
what kind
of
of films. I don't know what he's directing, but people in the reviews comparing him to Fassbinder, and I just think that's going a bit far because Fassbinder was like openly just like viciously abusive to people, and I think that this Thomas character is a lot less toxic. I think he's like maybe a little controlling and demanding on set, but like I just don't get this. Everyone's saying Fassbinder, Fassbinder, and I don't really see that.
there was a film about Fassbinder that came out 2 years ago called Enfant Terrible. Did you see this?
I
Which
did, and
is
I didn't really connect to it. I didn't really like the sort of staginess of it all.
because that was a kind of a Brechtian version of Fassbinder, but the main actor in this film was really good at embodying this real physical presence who's like so demanding and mean and vicious. But in passages, it's all about Franz Rogalski because he's this man who cheats on his boyfriend, but then tells his boyfriend immediately, and then tries to have both a woman and a man going at the same time, and can't really ever see the damage he's inflicting on others.
People keep calling this character like toxic and narcissistic and possibly sociopathic, and I think that it's really just there's a lot of messiness and indecisiveness and just someone being an asshole in their personal life. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he misses his ex when he's in this new relationship, and he has a hard time seeing him with a new lover, and I think these are normal and human things that people go through during breakup. So I just think some of these characterizations about like who he is going a little bit far.
The question for me is whether Rogalski actually has the range as an actor, because he's become probably the most famous, not famous, but the most critically acclaimed German actor of the past 5-10 years, ever since he was in Victoria, and then he's in Transit. In the Isles was actually a pretty good film. I like that one as well.
I like
He's
him
the,
even when he's in when I don't really like the film that he's in. Like I'm not a huge fan of
yeah.
Transit. I remember him being really great in that, and I didn't really love In the Isles, but I thought he was great in that as well. I think there's something weird going on in this movie with like the fashion, and I get that we're going for like this sort of non-traditional masculinity, like modern queers who dress a little more flamboyantly. But it was all extremely distracting for me because I don't know. There's like this belly shirt and this green sweater, and I feel like it didn't really go with the character, and I kept struggling to figure out if these bold fashion choices on the lead character were saying something, but I don't think they were. I think it was just kind of there to set up this really, really fantastic scene later on with Agatha's parents. But
Mm-hmm.
I found it like just incredibly distracting. Everyone else seemed kind of dressed, I hate to say the word normally, but dressed
Chic, I think.
yeah, everyone looks like but there was something about the fashion that was just extremely distracting to me and it didn't match the character. But I don't think that he had the range for this character, and I just didn't believe him as this sort of malignant narcissist that they're trying to say he is. I don't know.
The fishnet vest, it really reminded me of that episode in Girls where Lena Dunham's character goes to a rave in like Brooklyn or something, and she's wearing almost the same thing, and it takes you completely out of the thing. I couldn't focus on anything apart from how awful his clothes were. And so I believe Franz is a straight man and he's playing a bisexual here. What did you think of his dancing? Was it kind of bordering on?
I think the dancing is fine. I think that there's just like this weird gaze on his ass in a moment where he's just kind
Yeah.
of like quote unquote like shaking his tush. It also is just kind of like this strange choice that doesn't really lend any more understanding of the character. His dancing is fine. I just haven't. I think there's something about the way that this character is written and the way it's played that it makes it like the weak link that made it hard for me to believe that this whole everyone else is around. Everyone else who comes into his orbit.
Yeah.
Their world just crumbles because he's just so. I just had a hard time with that. And I also I need more about this relationship that that they're married. The two men are like sort of married and they've been together for a really long time, and
Mhm.
I just think it's just this one little indiscretion or sex outside of the thing just like makes it completely crumble, and I want to know like who these people are and like what they believe, and I don't think we ever really get that.
So that's what I wrote in my review, because the thing about French movies, especially my favorite French filmmaker is Romer, is the conversation. It's
Mhm.
that they really talk about things or they say things that they don't mean. And I found the dialogue in passages is actually kind of plain. There's times where they're lying to each other or they're maybe deceiving in what they mean, but it's not that deep. It's sort of, and it's not that interesting. They don't talk about anything. The funniest for me is the novelist character who's like, yeah, I might write another novel. Who knows? And is he supposed to be like a parody of a French writer or something? Because he was
I don't
so
think
stupid.
anyone in this, I think everything in this film is dead ass serious, and nothing is a parody of anything. Do you know what I mean?
But it felt like a parody of a French film. It felt like those sketch show comedies you see of the Godard, the way they talk, and to me it just felt really bizarre.
Yeah.
I kind of
This was my hard time with the film, just like believing it from the beginning, and not seeing it as this sort of like, it's if you watch his, other films, it's like this like very serious departure in style and form, and everything.
yeah.
Like I feel like when I was watching the one about Love is Strange, it's
Love
just
is
like this.
Strange is great.
It's
Yeah.
really great, but he lets those characters speak to each other throughout the entire thing. It's basically, you're inside this apartment with them and they're talking about their feelings and their lives, and by the end of it, you know who everyone is and what they want and how they view the world. And passages are
Mhm.
just a little too distant from everyone's actual, interior lives.
I felt that maybe if he had an American character in it, he could have found maybe an anchor to create a believable character that would have worked within the film. But that sounds to me like what I'm saying is kind of nationalistic, that only American filmmakers should make American films or French filmmakers should make films about French people. But there was something there that I felt like there was no, it just, to me, it's just bizarre. Like he has a German, a British person, and a French woman, and yeah, they none of it really. They all three of them seem to be in three different films. Did you get that sense or?
I got the sense that, yeah, I felt like I was living in this just sort of like fantasy Paris. That's not really what Paris is really like, you know.
Hmm.
And I also feel like the lives of, I'm sorry, I forget Adele's character's name, Agatha.
Agatha, yeah.
Agatha and Martin's like sort of like lives outside of the Tom's character are kind of boring and don't really have much weight to anything. Like she's just a teacher and she interacts a little bit with the kids and tells them that her personal life is none of their business. And it's all kind of just boring and not very dynamic. Same with Martin, I mean, I just didn't get a sense of these people's lives.
I didn't get a feel for them at all. But maybe one of the reasons why people really like this film is that outside of maybe HBO, American narrative storytelling does not have sex scenes like this. I mean, the last I can remember is maybe the scene with Marnie and in Girls Again, where Charlie is sort of tossing the salad, as it were, and that was like, oh shit, Americans can do this too. But in passages, you have maybe 4 or 5 sex scenes, and they do reveal something about the character, and they're sort of graphic, but not that graphic. They're like still simulated. It's not like anything like wow, but they are quite. They
I
go
think
on for a while as well. So
there is one scene between Franz and Ben that I would say is quite graphic, and I think I would call it gratuitous. I think it goes on a little bit too long.
yeah, but you don't see their genitals. The only genitals you see is of the random novelist guy, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's like when he's sort of like popping out of a shower, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that seems strange. But the yeah, I think the sex scene I was mentioning before, I think it goes on too long. It's yeah, I don't know. I wasn't into it.
but I felt that there was a lot of sex in the movie, but I never found any of it sexy or erotic because there was almost no build up. It's kind of random. They sort of just suddenly have sex. It's like they're just staring at each other, then they do it, but you don't see why they want to do it other than just sort of being dictated to by the film
Yeah, I
itself.
feel the same way. I would say there was like very little heat in the film between these people.
Yeah,
I didn't feel any
because
like sexual urgency of like I'm dying to get with you. And you know what I mean? It's when I think of like, movies that are just like hot, it's like Sliver, like they're just like you get to have these people like, yeah, staring at each other and wanting each other. And it's just, I didn't get that. I don't know. I guess the scene of them dancing in the club was kind of sexy.
I would love them to bring back the era of like Body Heat or something, or what's the film with Michael Douglas, the really basic one where she chases after him after they break up.
Disclosure.
No, the one where she boils the rabbits.
Oh, Fatal Attraction.
Fatal Attraction. Yeah, I kind of want the sex from these films, or even the stupid sex scenes you get in like The Specialist or something. I miss this era of sex scenes, but this that's kind of an American style of sex scenes with all the oil and the steam coming up and the stupid music or something. And that's kind of like cheesy, but it's actually more believable than whatever he's trying to
And
do
those are all sort
with
of
the
designed to
characters.
tantalize, and they have like, like everything surrounding them, the music, the candles, the setting, and everything like that. And it's
Yeah.
just, I think is really going for this, just like ultra realistic, like just two people fucking in a bed, and this is
Yeah.
what it looks like. There's no cuts. We're just gonna like, focus on one actor's ass as he's pumping in and out, and like it's a choice, It's just it definitely feels less hot. I think we need more stylizing when it comes to fucking on film.
But I think he would just say that's kind of how he intended to do it. So you kind of come at an impasse there. It's probably the way he wanted to frame those scenes. And
Every single thing in this movie is super deliberate. There's no
yeah,
accidents here. But
I love the production design. I kind of want one of these flats because they have all the condiments right next to on this like little ledge in the kitchen. So it just the flats are so perfectly rustic and they look really casual, but they've actually been really well designed and the way
well,
he
the whole thing
shoots
is like a
is
hipster
nice.
fantasy when it comes to the living quarters.
Yeah, but I mean the real Paris is living in like an absolute tiny fucking box because it's so expensive. And his last films are so tied to economic reality, and this one sort of feels kind of like is the director like a billionaire or something? I don't know. It's just
They
I
own
didn't.
property together. There's like an argument about have to paint the window panes before we show this to everything like
Yeah.
that. I think they're pretty, bougie. But yeah, no, I felt the same thing when I was watching Love is Strange, like on top of the whole thing centers around like, these people who are being priced out of New York City. And it's not just the main characters too. It's also the secondary characters are having a hard time, raising money to send their kid to Europe on a field trip and things like that. And there's just so much
Hmm.
more real discussion of like real matters that these people are going through. And I felt like this was like this sort of European soap opera where things like that we couldn't possibly, be bothered to talk about.
And so now, if you don't want to hear any spoilers, you should look away. But there is one bit which confirms my French film pastiche theory, which is the ending, which is the very end, which is the freeze frame of Franz Rogalski on a bike, freeze frame, and then the film just ends. And the music is really weird. And it's obviously like a 400 Blows reference, but to me, that was just the most cheesy thing I've ever seen in in art
Yeah, I
house
thought
cinema in
yeah,
years.
that was cheesy, but the scenes, the two scenes before that are both fantastic. There's the scene in the cafe. Yeah, I don't want to give things away. Yeah, the both scenes between two different people at the end, like really, really bring it together. And that was one thing I noticed after watching it a couple of times is that although I didn't really, care for a lot of things throughout the movie, those two scenes really do bring the movie together and are really quite powerful.
And the one scene for me that sort of merits this comparison to Maurice Pilet is the scene with his girlfriend's, I guess girlfriend, I don't know, his girlfriend's parents when they want to ask him how he's going to provide for her and whether he's going to go back to Germany. And there you really feel that his egoism is being challenged for once in the film. And then you want to see how he reacts. And to me, that's the only time I felt really uncomfortable watching the film. And that was something really powerful in the movie, which I wish was just he did a bit more of that because that and then maybe the penultimate scene actually with Agatha and Thomas I thought was really powerful outside the school. And there's some scenes that are really good, but it is actually just a collection of scenes. It's not a whole. I mean, it is passages basically, passages
And I would
from.
also like to know, like, this Franz Rogowski character, like, what is the source for all this sort of bad behavior, all this bad behavior in his interpersonal, communications. And, I know that, like, the saying that hurt people hurt other people, like, who hurt him? Like, we just have no idea who he is, and he's just a film director.
I wouldn't mind that if he was a force of nature, but he's not really a force of nature. He's not that scary or terrifying or
Well, that's
sexy
the
or
other,
interesting.
this is the other thing that I have a hard time with, the way that people are characterizing him, because, in the early scenes, he's very, kind of warm and communicative and tender with his lovers, and he's honest with them. And those aren't really the classic traits of like, this horrible, controlling, malignant, sociopath. Like
Mm,
he's kind of not terrible. Men can be a lot worse. I think it's this one little affair that causes this like sort of terrible series of events, but he's also reacting to it. And I like that the movie doesn't really judge him as much
hmm.
as I think other people would, but I don't think he's as quite as terrible as everyone's making him out to be in these reviews. Or maybe
No.
he's just not dynamic enough for me to like sort of clock it as this like total sociopath. I don't get that from this portrayal.
Who would you have to replace Franz Rogowski in the main role?
I have no idea. I have to think about that. Jared Leto. Just
Ryan
kidding.
Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Let's get an American.
No,
Exactly.
no, he's Canadian. And so now that we've had our great conversation about passages, have you changed your mind
Since the conversation or since I've watched it 3 times?
since the conversation?
I don't want to be dismissive of it just because I didn't personally like it. I do think that there's a lot of complexities in this sort of story.
Hmm.
I just it was my main problem was the Rogowski character, but yeah, I would recommend people see this movie. I think it's a good conversation starter. I think it's an interesting portrayal of bisexuality. So yeah, I don't think I like it more. I think I'm just I don't know what to say.
I think it's kind of a flaw of me that if I'd just seen it in Panorama at a screening by itself, I would have gone, actually, that's quite good. That's a nice freestyle movie. That's quite interesting. But then it comes with all this extra textual baggage, which is the hype coming out of Sundance. So that makes me a bit more reactive to the hype, I think. So yeah, I give it 2.5 out of 5. So I wouldn't pan it. I don't hate it. Anyway, so talking about the panorama, there's actually plenty of queer cinema and very diverse, so focusing on gay, trans, bisexual, and a bit in between. And you have been watching quite a lot of it, and you're even going to contribute a piece to Journey into Cinema on something to do with LGBTQ plus people. So tell me a bit about some of the films that you've seen in Berlinale and which ones people should have on their radar.
I really loved Kokomo City, which was also at Sundance. It's a documentary about Black trans sex workers
Hmm.
in the States, and I think it does what the best documentaries about trans people do, which is just sort of allow them to speak and
Hmm.
uninterrupted interviews. But this also offers really interesting discussions about attitudes towards transness within the Black community. What should change. But it opens with this one woman telling this story about an altercation with a client that's it's kind of terrifying, but she's obviously traumatized and using humor as a defense mechanism. It really sets the tone for the rest of the movie because it's just like this mixture of like scary and funny, and you just sort of see the bravery and resilience it takes for some of these women just to survive and possibly make it out. But yeah, the tone is like sort of surprisingly lightweight and bouncy, and it creates this interesting contrast between some of the more serious subject matter that is on the screen, and the black and white photography is really really beautiful. And yeah, huge recommendation for me for that.
And are there any other great trans portrayals in the Berlinale?
Let's see. I didn't see all of Transfariana, which is this documentary about a trans woman and a FARC member who meet in jail and fall in love. And I only saw the first hour of it because I had to go to the dentist, but that was a really interesting documentary I think people should see.
What about
And
Femme?
I have not seen Femme yet because apparently it's still not totally mixed down. So they're coming in just under the wire with that. But Femme, I think, is one to look forward to. I think it's about a young Black drag queen who runs into a white guy who assaulted her in the past. And she runs into him in a sauna. And he does not clock who she is because she's out of drag. And I think this sets this sort of like revenge tale into motion. I'm really excited for this. I really like this Nigerian film from a director called Babatunde Apalao, and it's called All the Colors of the World Are Between Black and White. And it's this like sort of tender, quiet, gorgeously shot film about two men just sort of struggling to come to terms with their attraction for each other. And it's really, I know it's cliche to say, but beautiful in its simplicity. It doesn't really try to do too much besides tell this little story, and it focuses on these nice little moments and just feel the nice little motifs, like the background noise of these couples arguing in the apartment, that they're living in, sort of mirroring what is going on between these two men. Really nice, really solid, and it looked great on the big screen. So I recommend that. And I also really like this film Opponent by Milad Alami, which has a really interesting conflict at the center of it that I just don't really want to spoil. But it's about an Iranian family applying for asylum in Sweden. And we learned that they left the country under sort of dodgy circumstances, and we're not really quite sure why. But the father joins this local wrestling club, and shit goes down, and it's very compelling, really well acted. It's about immigration, masculinity, same-sex attraction, family dynamics. Cinematography is really lovely, so I recommend that. And also, there's a Berlin set party movie, a film set in like the Berlin party scene called Drifter by a guy called Hannes Hirsch. And the premise isn't particularly new. It's like this beautiful white boy moves to the big city and gets his heart broken, and then takes a trip to the dark side while seeking new forms of intimacy and connection. Sometimes it can be cringe to see your own city, the party scene like on screen. But I think this was really a pretty authentic portrayal of what goes on here. Just like, the dancing, the experimenting, the kinky, fetish stuff that's sort of mixed into the scene. Also the overdoses. There's a few problems with that. I think the lead is a little bit blank. I think they could give him a little bit more to do and more to say. Some of the dialogue lacks, just a little bit of subtext or, something more interesting beyond like people talking about drugs. But also, I guess that's kind of authentic Berlin. Sometimes you're really just stuck, in a bathroom stall listening to people talk about drugs. It doesn't really feel like Greg Araki style-wise. And it's not really like as visually striking as like the Doom Generation or Nowhere, but it gives off that energy of like, hot nihilistic people getting wild. It's, recommendable if you want something that feels young and hip and sexy and fun.
Cool. So yes, thank you so much for sharing some of the films that people can expect at the festival. I personally would like to recommend the Perspective Deutsches Kino section, especially Alaha, which is quite a powerful portrayal of a woman who has to try and restore her hymen before a traditional Kurdish marriage, which is quite a powerful tale with a really good lead in the center of the film. And then Seven Winters in Tehran sort of continues this Iranian theme that you were talking about earlier, with a quite powerful documentary about a woman who was going to be sexually assaulted, then she killed the guy, and then she was in jail for like 15 years on death row. So if you fancy something very depressing, then that's also good. But that's also a section that might get us sort of not very much love. So it's definitely worth checking out if you got some free time at Berlinale. So we got just a couple minutes left. Which film are you most looking forward to seeing in person in the film festival?
I'm really excited for Manodrome, because Jesse Eisenberg joining this masculine sort of libertarian men's group. I'm really excited for that. I think Jesse gained some weight for it, going to the gym. I think there's like this sort of like homoerotic element to it. There's not much known about, it's one of the competition films, so no one's really seen it. But I think that there's some sort of like, Jesse gets gay feelings and goes crazy sort of vibe to it, which I'm really, really excited to see.
Maybe he does a Christian Bale and really bulks up for the film and wins lots of awards. The one I'm most looking forward to is in the one that just came up in my mind as I was thinking of this, is the Boris Becker documentary. I'm quite intrigued to see how that one plays out, because he was in jail in the UK for, I think, not paying his taxes. Yeah, and then he got extradited to Germany, and now he's back on Eurosport presenting all the tennis. So I'm wondering if he's learned anything from his...
I have no emotional connection to Boris Becker, so I don't know if this is going to be, an interesting film.
Well, it's Alex Gibney. He's a decent enough director. He's quite fun in the way he narrates films, and he makes everything really intense. So that one is special.
From what I understand, it really centers on just these sort of two interviews with him, and it's very like, Boris in his own words.
Yeah, I think so. As for the rest of the competition, I'm not that bothered, but maybe we will see some things. So yes, I'd like to thank you for coming on the podcast, Jared, and obviously
thanks for having me, Redmond.
Journey into Cinema will be covering basically everything at the Berlinale. So get ready and get excited.